Welcome back to The Religion of Good. My name is Ivan Richmond, author of the book, The Religion of Good. Today, I want to talk about arguments against Ayn Rand's book, The Virtue of Selfishness. Stay tuned. Now, before I criticize Rand, I want to be careful to avoid a strawman argument. Okay, so I want to acknowledge that Rand isn't totally dismissible out of hand, nor is she totally amoral. She has a system of ethics, albeit one that many may dislike for a variety of reasons. So, for example, she's opposed to theft. She is often unfairly maligned by people who read selfishness in the title and assume the worst. So I am merely going to point out in this video that her logic and her worldview don't really end up adding up. Okay, they don't work. Now, all that being said, Rand is not actually well respected by academics, and for good reason. When I checked with an academic friend of the family, an eminent sociologist at Emory University, he told me that Rand isn't even considered to be a second or even third-rate philosopher by academics. She's merely considered to be an ideologue, and there's good academic reasons for this. And yet she is beloved by the right. So I wanted to talk about that. It's not just leftists and socialists who disagree with her. As we'll see, it's even other libertarians who are laissez-faire capitalists. The consensus seems to be that her logic simply fails. So I want to show this in three stages. One, why Rand's core argument is logically circular. Two, that even sympathetic philosophers like the libertarian Robert Nozick reject it. And three, why, at an even deeper level, Rand is working with a false picture of reality itself. So let's start with Rand's basic claim. Rand argues that one's own life is the ultimate value because it makes all other values possible. If you are dead, you cannot value anything. You cannot pursue goals, you cannot experience meaning, happiness, or purpose. From this, she concludes, it is irrational to place any value above your own life. Therefore, ethics requires that you act in your rational self-interest, which is why she provocatively calls her ethics the virtue of selfishness. Now, to a layperson like you or me, this can sound clean, even powerful. But, as we'll see, academics have a different view. If her argument worked, altruism, understood as self-sacrifice, really would be irrational. So the question is, does the argument actually get us there? So I'm going to start with Stanford economist Ben Golub's critique. So Golub points out that Rand makes a subtle but fatal move in her argument. She slides from life is a necessary condition for having future values to life must therefore always be valued above any present value. Those are not the same claim. Yes, it's a truism that if you die, you won't have future values. But why should future values automatically override present ones? Imagine a person at time t1 who chooses to sacrifice their life for a cause, be it justice, truth, freedom, love, or even another person. Rand says this is irrational, but Golub asks, well, why? The fact that the person won't be alive at time t2 to enjoy future values does not contradict the fact that at time t1 they valued something more than their own continued existence. Rand never explains why future values should count more than present ones. She simply assumes it. And here's the key problem. For Rand's argument to work, she has to assume that the only values you are rationally allowed to have are ones that involve your own continued survival. But that is exactly what she's trying to prove. That makes the argument circular. She hasn't derived egoism from reason, she's smuggled egoism into her premises. Now let's turn to an article by Harvard philosopher Robert Nozick entitled On the Randian Argument from the spring issue of The Personalist from 1971. This is especially important because Nozick is not hostile to Rand's goal. In fact, he's a libertarian. He believes in individual rights and laissez-faire capitalism. So he's not some socialist complaining that Rand is too capitalist or something like that, in which we'd be suspicious that, he might be biased. Looking at Rand's logic, he finds that, unfortunately for him and his, Rand's logic does not get her where she wants to go. Nozick reconstructs Rand's argument in 4 steps and shows how each one fails. 1. Only living beings can have values. Rand argues that values require the possibility of gain or loss, which only living beings have. Nozick responds, even if that's true, why does that rule out impersonal values, such as religious values, perfectionist values, or aesthetic values? And is vulnerability really a necessary condition for valuing? At best, this tells us something about how humans value, not what is valuable. Step 2. Therefore, life itself is a value. Now, this is a classic philosophical mistake. Life may be a necessary condition for valuing, but necessary conditions are not automatically values themselves. Having an illness, for example, is a necessary condition for being cured. That doesn't make illness a value. Rand never shows why life must be valued above happiness, truth, holiness, or meaning. She just declares it. 3. Humans must live as rational beings. Rand says that we must live as rational beings, independently, non-parasitically, self-directed. Nozick examines her arguments here and finds them incomplete. Why is rational independence always morally required? Why is dependence always wrong? Why is parasitism irrational if, in fact, it can succeed, at least locally, or even for an entire lifetime? Rand confuses what she admires with what she has proven. Nozick is clear that he's not claiming that parasitism is good, only arguing that Rand's argument fails to show that it is. 4. Therefore, rights and non-sacrifice. This is the biggest leap of all. Rand concludes that individuals have rights, that no one may sacrifice themselves to others, and no one may sacrifice others to themselves. Nozick asks the devastating question: if morality is grounded in self-interest, why shouldn't my interest justify overriding yours when they conflict? Rand's answer depends on a huge, unargued assumption that rational interests never truly conflict. Nozick says that is not a conclusion. That is a metaphysical assumption. So, thus far, I've been talking about how academics criticize Rand's logic. But I think Rand's mistake goes deeper than logic. Rand assumes a particular picture of reality, that we are discrete, independent individuals who enter the world, act upon it, and then leave it. But, in my opinion, that picture is false. We are not rugged individuals. We are interdependent beings. We learned to speak because others taught us. We learned to reason because we inherited traditions of thought. We survive because of social cooperation. According to evolutionary psychology, we evolve to be social because survival itself is mutual. There is no clean boundary where I end and the world begins. If the cosmos is an ocean, we are the waves. We rise from it, we swell, we crash, and we return. The cosmos is not dead, it is conscious through us. Human beings are not a collection of isolated atomic individuals. Rather, we are a peer-to-peer network. And in this kind of reality, selfishness doesn't make sense. Our survival is not separate, but shared. So the ethical ideal is symbiosis, not selfishness. The virtue of selfishness fails not because it is too harsh, but because it mistakes the conditions that make value possible for the values that make life worth living. I think Rand was trying to make an argument for laissez-faire capitalism based on personal responsibility and independence. I certainly agree that personal responsibility is virtuous, but dignity does not require egoism, and meaning does not arise from standing alone. It arises from participation in something larger than ourselves. Altruism does not require self-sacrifice, only cooperation. If personal responsibility is a virtue, so are compassion and agape. We can strengthen each other by standing together. That ultimately is why I think Rand's argument fails. Thank you for listening. I'm sure we'll have a lively debate in the comments. I'd ask you to keep it civil and polite. I respect everyone's right to freedom of expression, but hopefully we can exercise it politely. Be good, everyone.